In some verses and hadiths about paradise, Allah promises that believing men who have earned His favor will be given wives in paradise. And some questions come to the minds of people who hear this. Why is it mentioned that there will be sexuality in paradise? Why is there a description of a lustful paradise? Why is it mentioned that men will be given houri as wives? Or, if men will be given houri, what will be given to women? Is there sexist discrimination in the blessings of paradise? Now let's examine these questions logically with the help of evidence and see if Allah does indeed promise a paradise full of houris for the believing men who will go to the paradise. First of all, we must know this. Out of the hundreds of heaven blessings promised in the Holy Qur'an and the hadiths, it would be unreasonable to think that all the blessings of paradise are based solely on the relationship between men and women and to ignore verses such as, "And you will have therein whatever your souls desire," which expresses that the desires of all believers will be fulfilled without distinction between men and women. Because in a book of 6,666 verses, the number of verses in which the word houri is mentioned is only 4. Moreover, paradise, which includes all spiritual and sensual blessings, also includes all physical and corporeal pleasures. For example, eating, drinking, traveling, having palaces, having a talk with loved ones, discovering new things, experiencing new things, learning what you don't know, and getting rid of the need to cut one's nails, cut one's hair, sweat, get dirty, and use the toilet. Each of these is one of the thousands of blessings of paradise, like sexuality. To explain in more detail, the blessings of the eternal paradise are basically divided into 2 parts. The first and greatest pleasure of the people of paradise is having earned the approval of Allah the Almighty, who the one who created them. Physical pleasures come in second place. The most basic of these are the pleasures gained by satisfying the most basic needs of the world, such as shelter, food, and marriage in the most sublime way, and many times more. The blessings that Allah has made permissible, which give peace and pleasure to people in this world, will be in paradise, and of course even marriage, which is one of the greatest pleasures within the permissible limits, will be in paradise. Such questions arise because there are always bad examples of sexuality which obtained by forbidden ways. The image of sexuality as immoral has been formed in people's minds. Such questions arise because it is thought that sexuality and marriage will be in a base form in paradise too, as in the minds of people now. And so that it seems like sexuality is not worthy of being in paradise. However, as we have just said before, everything that gives people pleasure in a permissible way in the world will be in a much higher and purer form in paradise. Now that we have settled this issue, let's examine why the verses promise only for men and not for women. First of all, paradise is a place where both believing men and believing women will enjoy its blessings. In other words, women will enjoy the blessings of paradise just as much as men. Both will be given all blessings and favors, but the degree of reward in paradise will not be determined by whether a person is male or female, but by the degree to which he or she pleases Allah. As it says in Surah Al-Hujurat, "Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Allah the Almighty, who is the possessor of absolute justice, will not withhold anything from the reward of the man or the woman." When we look at the Holy Qur'an, we see that in almost all the places where the blessings of paradise are mentioned, believing women are mentioned along with believing men. For example, verse 72 of Surah Al-Tawbah says, "Allah has promised the believing men and believing women gardens beneath which rivers flow, wherein they abide eternally, and pleasant dwellings in gardens of perpetual residence." It also refers to the people of paradise as mutaki, the pious, that is, those who truly fear Allah. This word is common to both men and women. The one is not distinguished or separated from the other. In other words, while the blessings of paradise are common to both male and female believers, in some aspects the 2 genders are superior to each other in piety or are blessed according to their needs. For example, in verse 33 of Surah Al-Fatir, "Gardens of perpetual residence which they will enter. They will be adorned therein with bracelets of gold and pearls, and their garments therein will be silk," and mentions the blessings of paradise that women will enjoy and be satisfied with. In addition to all this, the fact that rewards for the nature and needs of men are also mentioned is an indication that there is no gender discrimination, but that rewards are addressed according to desires and needs of both genders. Furthermore, the Quran mentions about not just the blessings of paradise such as the houris, but all the rewards and punishments that will be given. Its attitude is like a teacher who encourages his students to make them do homework with rewards or scaring them with punishments. Some of these students will be motivated by the fear of punishment and do their homework, while others will be motivated by the reward and do their homework. In the same way, the mention of houris in the Qur'an is based on such wisdom. Namely, men have a natural inclination toward women. Women, on the other hand, do not have the same inclination toward men as men have toward them. As it says in Surah Al-Imran, love of women has been made appealing to people. Indeed, when we look at the research done in this field, we see that men are much more inclined towards the opposite gender than women. However, due to its wisdom regarding personal, family, and social life, Islam is the religion that has the sharpest limits in the relationship compared to other religions. For example, there are limits such as the need to dress modestly as in the hijab, limited topics that can be discussed, no touching, no looking, no being alone in a closed place with a non-relative of the opposite gender. But on the other hand, the sin that a man is most exposed to during the day is not alcohol, not gambling, not interest, but adultery and the derivatives. In other words, both men have a natural inclination and they are frequently exposed to scenes by the beauty of uncovered women in daily life, and their religion has very sharp limits at this point. Such a man whose lustful senses are in overdrive and who is not always in his right mind needs a motivation, almost a consolation, when he is struggling with those senses. Allah mentions the houris in the Holy Qur'an as a kind of motivation and consolation for such a man, informing him that he will gain better ones in paradise for what he has given up for Allah's sake. He mentioned it in order to stop people whose lustful feelings are aroused, to set a limit and a boundary for them, to say, do not waste these lustful feelings in haram, do not be rebellious, there are better things in paradise. Since the Holy Quran is the word of Allah and is addressed to all human beings and not to a specific group of people, and since there are all kinds of people in human societies, reminding people who have difficulty controlling themselves in terms of lust by mentioning the torments of hell or the blessings of paradise is not absurd, but rather wise. This is a requirement of Allah's rububiyyat, His disciplinary power. Finally, it should be mentioned that in Islam, the soul and the essential element of worship is sincerity. Sincerity is doing something for the sake of Allah the Almighty. In other words, the torments of hell or the blessings of paradise mentioned in the Quran can only serve as an incentive for a person to make a choice or as a secondary reason to make a choice. If they become the main reason, then it will break the sincerity and cancel the deed. In other words, although Allah the Almighty brought a person out of the darkness of nothingness, gave him the blessing of life, did not make him a plant and an animal, gave him the blessing of humanity, honored him with Islam, and although he is the Sultan of eternity, took him as his interlocutor, if a person performs his worship for other reasons without taking into consideration the consent of Allah the Almighty, his worship will be ruined and his worship will be cancelled. Yes, a true servant of Allah the Almighty does not accept a great benefit like heaven as the goal of worship. But don't misunderstand, considering the blessings of paradise as an incentive may help some people in their worship. However, this should not overshadow the main reason for worship, which is to gain Allah's consent. That is, while the blessings of paradise and the tortures of hell remain incentives, the main purpose of worship should always be to seek Allah's consent.
Allah has promised the believing men and believing women gardens beneath which rivers flow, wherein they abide eternally, and pleasant dwellings in gardens of perpetual residence. But approval from Allah is greater. It is that which is the great attainment.